record. And governing board, we record, but we don't really record the other meetings, not purposefully anyway. Because we're recording
And
it
that's,
on
Laura
YouTube.
insists on recording that when we can go to YouTube. She still wants to record it.
Look, it found you.
Okay, Steve's here. And we can't start for another 10 minutes,
5 minutes.
5 minutes.
Oh, did you go to the historic grant?
I did not.
I was gonna ask for an update, I was.
Well, maybe, I bet you Steve went.
Yeah.
And when we start the meeting in 5 minutes, I bet you Steve could tell us.
Yeah. If you're.
Well, he could tell us now.
Now, because it's
Oh, not on the agenda?
not on the agenda, I don't think.
It's not on the agenda. So, Steve, we're referring to you and what happened, did you go last night? I'm not looking the right way. Did you go last night to the presentation about the grants for HBOZs?
Can you
Yeah.
update us?
And the group here is saying, even though the meeting's not started, that sure, why not? So if you can, why not? But you're muted.
He's muted. Can we unmute him?
Yeah, so I went last night. It's a really good idea. The presentations were awful. It was incredibly superficial. In follow-up, I have a ton of questions I need answered because they really didn't talk about process. So I'm going to be calling NHS tomorrow. Unfortunately, every time I read or hear the acronym NHS, I think of the National Health Service in England. Which is actually a good thing. Anyway, so the major questions were, one, is it $10,000 totally available to the entire Jefferson Park HPOZ or a total of $10,000 per application? Answer, $10,000 per application is available. So that's really good. However, you must fall within a certain financial need, which is defined as 80% of the area median income, which is actually, I think it's going to be pretty high.
Yeah.
So for an individual in LA, I think it's somewhere around $66,000 to $70,000 a year, and for a family of four, it's probably upwards of over $100K a year. So I think, and the new figures are supposed to come out this month or next month. So I think a lot of people in the Jefferson Park HPOZ potentially will be eligible for the grant applications. Then there are free services being provided, which include technical assistance, architectural renderings, and support in terms of creating, filing, and HPOZ applications and appearing before the HPOZ board, which I think is critical to helping people getting their projects approved in a timely fashion. I stopped going to the HPOZ meetings a while ago because I found them incredibly frustrating because the Jefferson Park HPOZ doesn't really follow the laws or the Jefferson Park Preservation Plan, but that's a different issue.
It's important.
Yeah, it's a very important one, but there's no way to rectify it because the director of OHR, Ken Bernstein, likes it that way. So, but what these services involve is that the USC School of Architecture has identified people who will help with architectural plans, as well as a group called the National Organization of Minority Architects, NOMA. So those two groups will be available free of charge to help people get appropriate architectural plans. And then there's also a group at USC. It's a conservation and preservation master's program that they have within the School of Architecture.
Right.
And they've identified people within that area to help folks not only identify things that they could fix in their house, but how to do it that meets preservation goals, including the Secretary of the Interior standards. So these are all really good things if they could pull it off. because they didn't really go into the process, it became very vague as to how the application actually works. I was able to get into the website this afternoon and try to go through the applications. And at this point, it's incredibly confusing. So I can't imagine someone who hasn't navigated this process in the past being able to clearly get through it. So for example, one of the questions was, does NHS want folks to register in the website if they want the free services or just for the grant application? And of course, the good answer to that question is we want everyone to register who wants anything. That way we can track it, right? And that way you can do quality improvement and quality assurance of your own program. However, when you go into the website, it looks like you have to fill out the financial aid application in order to get free services, which doesn't make any sense because the free services are supposed to be available to anyone who has a qualifying house within the HPOZ. So to have to fill out a financial information form of the depth they're asking for to access the free services doesn't make any sense and becomes a huge hurdle for people. I couldn't see non-English language forms. So I couldn't identify anything that was in Spanish or Korean, which are both populations within the HPOZ, although they did have a translator at the meeting last night. Regarding the meeting. So there were over 50 people who attended the Zoom meeting last night, which was a really good turnout. I'd say there were probably about 45 residents or not necessarily residents. Let me re-put this. So there were at least 45 people who were not affiliated with USC, School of Architecture, NHS, or planning. So that was a really good turnout from the community.
Were you able to grab a chat or something where you would have the names of who participated?
So I asked if they were going to post the entire Zoom meeting because it was recorded, and they said they would do it, but they didn't provide a web address.
Right. Okay.
I could ask them for the names. Yeah. I think that's a good idea.
Well, the reason I think that's a good idea, and for those who are joining now, we have not actually convened our meeting. We're having a pre-discussion. You can ask them if we could have the names, not because we're going to contact them, but because we did so much neighborhood marketing from various organizations. It would be nice to try and identify which thing worked.
Yeah.
Did UNNC send something out? WA sent stuff out. You sent stuff out. Planning department sent stuff out. So if we could kind of backwards identify, it'd be useful.
So I didn't receive anything from UNNC, and I'm supposed to be on the UNNC mailing list.
It was in a newsletter. I'm pretty sure we did. I could be wrong. I'm saying we, but we would be me. So I'll go back and look. So maybe UNNC did not.
Or maybe UNNC did it on Facebook. Steve, did they identify, how was Jefferson Park selected? Was there a request from someone in Jefferson Park? And were you the request?
Good question. So I've been complaining to OHR about the lack of resources for low-income HPOZ neighborhoods since before we became an HPOZ. Even trying to get their assistance in organizing the neighborhood, which was really necessary to get an HPOZ. But we did it without OHR's help. And in fact, as far as Ken Bernstein has cited us as the example of how a neighborhood could organize. Be that as it may, since 2011, I think it was, when we became an HPOZ, there's been no assistance really from OHR. And so I've been complaining about that for 13, 14 years. And so I guess they finally had an opportunity to offer something that didn't cost them anything.
Okay.
Right. So they remembered that Jefferson Park is a community in need. Adams Normandy is the other community that I guess was the pilot for this. They've already been engaged. And I guess they've already received resources. I don't know how that went, but hopefully it went well.
Well, that's another question.
Is someone from Adams Normandy who's gone through the application process and been successful, could they be available to come and sort of pilot for Jefferson Park?
That's another great idea. It would be great to have a kind of peer-to-peer.
Yeah.
I think that would be excellent. I think that
Success.
there's so much bad communication coming from OHR
Mhm.
that peer-to-peer I think would be very helpful. So for example, in the presentations last night, Daniel Mata, who is the OHR person designated for the Jefferson Park HPOZ, went through a presentation and essentially said that only contributors qualify for the program. And so I raised my hand. I said, but wait a second, I know that not all HPOZs are the same, but in the Jefferson Park HPOZ, we have 3 categories of
Right.
structures. We have contributors, we have contributor altered, and we have non-contributors. It's understandable why non-contributors wouldn't be eligible unless they want to become contributors. But contributors and contributor altered should both be eligible.
Well, they are.
Ken Bernstein jumped in immediately and said, yes, of course, contributor altered is eligible as well. But it's just, this is the kind of presentation they give. They create a pat, one-size-fits-all presentation and give it to communities for whom there are many exceptions, and they don't address them unless you call it out.
Right. And it is correct that contributors altered technically are contributors.
Yeah,
That it's
yeah,
just
absolutely.
an identification, not a designation.
And might
Absolutely,
be
but-
prioritized for renovation work so they become fully on contributors.
Not
Yeah.
that anyone ever changes a status in their records.
In fact, to get from a non-contributor to contributor would take an act of many gods. It just
Yeah, it's
doesn't
nearly
really happen.
impossible.
But
Right.
it seems to me, at least in principle, if someone wanted to do that, this program should be supportive. Anyway, so
Well-
they did go through the types of work that they would support. For example, people who have a need for windows, right? Because there have been a lot of aluminum windows installed, things like that. I asked if folks that have gone through code enforcement through the HPOZ process, who have found it financially not feasible to make the corrections that they were cited for, if OHR would proactively contact those people and see if they were willing to participate in this program so that they could get out of code enforcement.
Great.
Right, because a lot of people can't afford to make those changes once
Right.
they've already paid for the changes that put them in code enforcement.
Right.
And so-
Or they don't have the architect. I
Right.
mean, since they can get the free services.
Yeah, the free services are there and people should be able to do it. The problem is oftentimes it's both. They don't have the technical expertise and that they don't have the funds available to make the corrections that code enforcement requires. It seems to me if they were willing to do that through this program, OHR should have a plan to waive the fine,
Fine.
right? Because the fines are substantial for a code
Yeah,
enforcement.
if you earnestly trying to bring it into compliance and there's a pathway that can expedite and the city can participate in making sure it meets the goal, then I agree, waiving any fine that was incurred because of just inability to come up with the cash to move forward seems like an easy trade for a win-win for the city.
Yep. So that's kind of the overview of what took about an hour, I guess. The NHS people seem very willing to talk to folks. I'll know how willing tomorrow when I try to contact them. But right now, the way the website is set up, I found it not very user-friendly. So I'd like to talk to them about it so at least I can be helpful to folks who contact me and say, I tried to do this, I can't figure it out.
Great, thanks for the update.
And
Yeah,
also,
you're welcome. And
The,
I must say that I did compliment all 3 groups for being willing to collaborate with each other to help the community promote historic preservation. Because this is the history of this community and the other HPOZ communities, and if we don't support the preservation of that history, it will disappear. The history is now represented through the architecture. right? And there's a whole story that gets told through the architecture. So it's in everyone's interest to promote that preservation.
Okay, I have, oh, you have,
Yeah, no, I was just gonna let everyone know, but Steve in particular, that the UNNC is having a resource fair at Leslie Shaw Park, and
NHS.
NHS is gonna be there, yes.
Okay.
Oh, would you send me that information, please?
There's a flyer.
Yeah,
Well,
the
we're
flyer,
working
we had
on
an
the
issue
flyer.
with the flyer, but yes, we will send out the flyer and let you.
Let you distribute it widely. It's on June 1st, but we should convene our meeting.
So just one more point on that, if you don't mind. The reason why I would like that information is I owe everyone a follow-up to the meeting last night. And I would like to include that information in my follow-up, and my email list is now well over 300 people.
In Jefferson Park.
Then give me till tomorrow. We have a board member who's working on that, so give me till tomorrow.
Okay.
Terrific, thank you.
And my last question, and then we're starting the meeting, unless you said it when I was outside, when does this program begin?
It's begun. That's a good question. So I had the same question. It's already begun. They're accepting applications. It's first come, first served. And the end point is when they run out of money.
But they're never going to run out of free services.
Right.
They might run out of labor, however, or they may run out of the volunteers.
Yeah, you know, NOMA and USC may decide it's not worth their while to do this anymore, but
Right.
we'll see. We'll see. For now, you know, it's open and people should start participating.
Okay, so
Thank you.
thank you. I'm gonna officially convene the meeting at 7:26 p.m. This is UNNC's Planning and Zoning Committee meeting of May 15, 2024, and I'm Laura Myers. I'm the co-chair of this committee. I'm on the UNNC board and I live in Angeles Vista. And if we could all, I'm gonna share, no, I haven't even done anything. So while I'm working on opening up files to share the screen, including the agenda, everyone could introduce themselves. And I'm gonna start with Cheryl.
Cheryl Johnson,
Jefferson Park.
Jefferson Park.
Thank you.
Demetrius Paul. Western Heights.
Chris Carlson, Western Heights, and I'm the area 4 rep to UNNC for Western Heights and Kenny Heights.
Teresa Masonette, and I'm on the board and I represent the West Adams Avenues. Are we voting tonight? Do we?
Yeah, we'll go through that.
Oh, you.
I haven't been able to post the agenda yet, so now I'm going back. And then let's Steve and then Donna.
Steve Peckman, Jefferson Park for almost 20 years. Cheryl, were you at the meeting last night?
Meeting was it?
Oh, for the HPOZ. Cheryl's in Jefferson Park, but not the HPOZ,
Okay.
by the way. Okay, and Donna, if you're with us.
Donna Jones, West Adams Avenues.
Okay, so I am sharing, do the best I can, to share the screen. Can you guys, Steve and Donna, can you see? Yes? So this is our agenda. We just did the welcome, we called to order, and we did not do the next item, review of UNNC standing rules for committee stakeholder voting participation. And then we did do introductions and voting affirmations. So essentially, the standing rules say, our standing rules are a little different than other neighborhood councils. And we allow our stakeholders full participation in our committee meetings. But the definition of a stakeholder is someone who lives, works, worships, attends school, owns a property, and/or is otherwise a community interest stakeholder through their participation in a nonprofit organization which has a brick and mortar address within UNNC. And that could be almost any kind of nonprofit or, or school, or, that kind of friends of a library group, anything like that, as long as it has an address in UNNC. So I actually know that each person in tonight's meeting meets that criteria. Sometimes we have to kind of go through it. And John has added, my co-chair, John Arnold, has added to our standard template voting affirmations. So when we take our first vote, just we'll affirm at that time. So on the agenda tonight is general public comments. That would be in addition to what we were just doing for the last 15 minutes. And that would be on any item not on tonight's agenda. And then there are a couple of city council motions related to ED1, which is the mayor's executive directive number 1 for affordable housing. So we're going to look at both. Okay, so I get rid of that. Both a motion from Eunice Hernandez to create essentially an ICO, interim control ordinance, and or a new discretionary approval process for, that interferes with the ED1 automatic yes, if the site itself has an RSO property that is currently occupied by tenants or recently presumably occupied it. And then the second motion we're looking at is similarly an interim control ordinance that would restore essentially the protections for HPOZs. And we're going to talk about maybe what that motion doesn't yet say, and maybe we would suggest some additions. And then lastly, not lastly, also on the agenda is the proposed landscape and site design ordinance. I don't know how much time we have tonight. I do have city planning's presentation at this point. So hopefully we'll have time to go through the whole thing. And then follow up, as always, follow up to previous cases, stuff that was notified to us, old business. One I already know that people want to talk about is the Wilshire Tow on Washington Boulevard. And then we have another one that came up this week. That's a case from 3 years ago, 1808 South St. Andrews. So anything else somebody wants to bring up? Anyway, that is the agenda. I'm going to stop the share. I feel like there's commotion going on behind me. Is that correct?
Yes, but they went upstairs, so we're good.
Yeah, because Chris is kind of like saying hi. Anyway, so the first item would be general public comments on any item not on the agenda. And Teresa, do you want to say a little bit more about this community resource fair?
Yes, sure. So Saturday, June the 1st, from 10 to 12 at Leslie Shaw Park, the UNNC is having an outreach event. So far, we have over 20 city and county entities that are participating. We're also going to be providing free tacos. And we're working with the council district to supply the tables and the canopies and
Right.
we're working on a flyer.
Right.
So
So we're going to be relying on not just ourselves, but, you, Steve, and anybody else who has email lists to get the word out. Because it would be really awful to have an event.
it won't be awful. We're going to have plenty of people. It's going to be a great event.
It's going to be a great event.
Yes, thank you.
And we're going to help. Steve, question.
I have another item if Teresa's done.
Yes.
Hands up, not a question, a comment.
Yeah, so my it's actually a question, which is, have the Planning and Zoning Committee received any updates about the Burger Palace project?
No.
Okay.
Well, the council office replied, I think you were on that email, that said, yes, we'll look into it. But,
Okay.
that may have been one of the triggers for the council office seconding the motion that we'll be talking about in a few minutes.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Any other public comments?
Yes,
Okay.
West Adams Avenue is
Oh.
hosting a community cleanup on, starting this Friday through Sunday at 8 o'clock. We have 4 dumpsters in the 2500, 2400 block, 7th Avenue, and we are inviting people to do their Big Sunday or spring cleaning and bring items to place in the dumpster. There should be flyers out everywhere, and if you need one, we can willingly share it with you, but we do invite the neighborhoods around us. It's not just for the avenues, and we will have coffee and continental breakfast Saturday morning on the 18th, as well as lunch from 12 to 2.
Thank you, Donna. I forgot to mention that. And just so you know, the UNNC has been posting that on our social media
Right.
sites.
Right, so that Saturday, the 18th, this is more announcement, is a day that everyone like should go to bed very early on Friday night because there are so many things happening on Saturday, the 18th. This is one. Lafayette Square is having their annual, and 50 households participate.
Oh, my God.
Yes, have their annual
Their used stuff sale.
used stuff treasure sale. St. Elmo Village is having with Council District 10, a sustainability weekend. I'm not sure. Oh, no, there's just lots and lots and lots of stuff going on. I think Jim Gilliam Park, they're opening up a new swim
Splash
center.
Mhm.
So get up early, plan to go from place to place. So, so Donna, what we did and promoted is like, go to Lafayette Square first, then clean out your closets for all your new treasures and bring the trash over to you.
Oh, gosh.
And we will accept it.
Exactly. Okay, any other public announcements? Public comments? All right, so moving on, we have it here. Do I need to repost the agenda items? I don't think so. So, ED1, Executive Directive Number 1, has been used to permit, at this point, apparently, more than 14,000 new units of affordable housing. I'm gonna dispute that number. I don't see how that's even possible, but it's,
But maybe they approved it, they just haven't built it yet.
yeah,
I mean,
maybe.
Because if you don't have to go through CEQA and you're able to
Oh, right, there's no way
go
to
around, you can just get stuff
kind of
approved.
just not track it. So anyway, but that's a good thing. I mean, if there, it's a good thing. And then, it's streamlining, but there's two new city council motions that are trying to put, not the brakes on that, but just put some parameters. So the first one is from Council District 1, Councilmember Eunice Hernandez. And it was triggered by a case in Eagle Rock, so it's not even her district as far as I know, but it doesn't matter. But there's a situation in Northeast LA where on the plus side, it would be building about 150 units. But on the minus side, there's 2 existing apartment buildings and something like 50 people are losing their homes in order to build the new units. And they're not likely even to be eligible to be relocated into those units. But in any case, it'd be a 2 or 3 year period.
It's important to note that they're losing rent stabilized homes.
Yes, RSO. Well, one's a single family house and with a lot of people in it, and the other is RSO. But they're on the same 2 parcels.
No, I think the owner sold it
Yeah,
and,
Okay.
and he's gonna kick them out so they can afford affordable housing.
But if it's a single family and there's another building on the same lot,
2 lots, 2 side by side,
Gotcha.
2 parcels.
that would,
Right,
would not work.
right, 2 parcels. So it's just a lot of people. So her motion is only addressing RSO. It's not addressing occupied rental housing. And it might be, I'm gonna ask us to chat just a little bit. I'm gonna pull up the motion. It might be that our comment is why only RSO. So, but let me pull up the motion, sorry.
That's good.
And if anybody else has anything to say while I'm looking for the
Yeah,
motion.
could I ask a question? Which
Please
is, there are apartment buildings in Los Angeles that are rent controlled.
Right,
And my question is, is it possible that under the ED1, rent controlled units could be replaced and new units put in that are actually more expensive than the rent controlled?
yes.
And
And
if
these-
so, how does that help the affordability question?
Yeah, no, it's a problem because the way ED1 is written, it's any kind of affordable housing, even affordable housing at 80%. No, I even think 120% of AMI, which is area median. So if 80%, Steve, you were looking at the numbers, it is something like 65 to 70,000 for one person, something like 80 to 85,000 for a couple, and over 100,000 for a family of four. And that's the 80% of median, but 120% of median takes us well over $100,000. And ED1 applies even to someone who's proposing a project that would be essentially 100% workforce housing. I do not know how they get renters. I mean, I don't know what kind of program exists that you could build a building that actually has those limits, but the ED1 does not say only low income or extremely.
Oh, well, that's the fundamental problem with ED1
Right.
is that there's no subtlety or nuance to it. It's a
Right.
sledgehammer that could actually destroy affordable housing. And I just want to begin this conversation by saying that I don't think there's anyone in this meeting who opposes affordable housing, right? So I think that should be a kind of foundation or baseline that we start the discussion from. If there is someone who opposes affordable housing, I'd like to hear from them, but I don't think there is. And so with that being said, I don't think it's in the best interest of the city to destroy affordable units, right? Whether they're rent control or have some other requirement on them that actually requires a cap that's reasonable for low-income people. And so, again, the problem with ED1, as I see it, is it provides a free ticket to developers without any real substantive oversight.
Right.
And I would like to comment on the AMI. If you remember, we had a board member who was a professor at Cal State,
Sure.
and she made 100,000,
Right.
100 something. So was unable to find affordable housing. So even if you make $100,000, you should be able to.
Well, no, I mean, that's the conundrum. I think we want housing for what's the missing middle. What we would define as the missing middle is 80% or to 120% AMI. Nobody's building that. So on the one hand, we want it,
Right.
but do we want it streamlined?
Or do we want it
Do we
at the
want it-
expense of existing?
Do we want it, well,
RSO?
but do we even want it, do we want it streamlined and do we want it to be non-discretionary? That, I mean, and I don't think necessarily we do.
No, certainly I don't.
Right.
Because when you circumvent CEQA, then you are no longer required to have trees. You can remove trees. There are a lot of
Right.
conditions where you don't have to follow the environmental regulations. So no, I don't think we
Well-
should have a streamline.
Right, and my question would be for this motion, we would be doing if we do something, we would do a community impact statement. We'd be recommending to the board to approve our position. So I would assume broadly, we support the concept behind this proposed interim control ordinance, but it should be citywide. It shouldn't be just council district one.
No, it should be city.
So that's one but. It should somehow acknowledge housing that, what am I trying to say? That is naturally affordable, but not necessarily RSO, naturally occurring affordable housing.
Where is that?
Where is
Laura?
that?
Yeah.
Explain that.
Yeah. Give me an example.
So, is it 1978 that's the cutoff for RSO? I'm trying to remember. There's a year,
1970.
1978, right?
I don't know. Is RSO and rent control the same thing?
Yes.
Yes.
Is it rent, RSO is rent stabilization
Ordinance.
ordinance. And yeah, rent stabilization ordinance.
Is the same as rent control?
Which is the same as rent control and it only, Here, I'm doing something while we're doing this. I'm so sorry. I'm going to put the captions on so we can capture whatever we vote on a transcript. And then save the transcript, and now I want to get it out of the way. Do that.
How about you just stop the share?
Yes.
Oh,
Oh,
there
here we
it
go. Okay, so I'm now doing a transcript, and Steve, you're on mute. You're still on mute.
Okay, looked it up. The property has to have been built on or before October 1st, 1978.
Okay, so there's certainly buildings that were built in 1979 and 1983. You know, maybe they're not pretty, maybe we don't like them, but by now are aging and the rents are low. Or people moved in then and are still there and the rents are low, but they're not protected. They're naturally occurring.
Properties are not, have never been protected
I
under
understand.
increases. So
No, I
you don't
understand.
know, they may be aging, but the rents may be quite,
They may be high.
or
Well,
chasing
even
market.
but even buildings built in 1920, if you move out and somebody else moves in, it's not rent control in that sense.
It's market.
It's market
Yeah,
then. So the point about it is buildings built, I mean, in other words, it's not likely that a building built 3 years ago is gonna have currently have low rates of rent. But it's easily conceivable that somebody moved into a brand new building 40 years ago, that's the mid 1980s, and their rents are pretty low compared to today's market rate. So that's the difference.
I think the point is we don't want to remove affordable housing that's currently existing.
Right,
right.
right. And that it's affordable compared to market rates. And
I guess my question with that is that if there was a building built in the mid-80s
Mhm.
that didn't have any restrictions on it, as a landlord, why would I not have increased that rent as time went on to make it market rate?
you mean for the people who lived in it, maybe they got 20% per year. Maybe they did, maybe they didn't. Now they couldn't. I mean, in other words,
Now there's a state.
Now there's a state law,
Ceiling.
that's been true pre-COVID.
Okay.
But often, you know, it's very much up to the individual property owner.
Right.
Because they may have really good tenants. And if they like really good tenants who look after the building and aren't causing them a lot of cost, then they may have not raised the rent every time or
Right.
at the highest
Oh,
rate.
yeah,
You know, I
we
mean-
have one, it's actually a house, but the guy moved in a long time ago and we didn't even think to raise his rent until now, and now it's like too late. I mean, it's not totally too late, but it's,
Okay.
But we can't micromanage.
no.
Right.
No, I'm
Because
just saying, there
charges-
is such a thing as naturally occurring affordable housing that's not
But
rent.
that's just stochastically exists.
And that's not
And
something the
there's no
state
way-
regulates.
I mean, the only way I
We
can
should
see
try
that you would be able to manage that is to say a building cannot be knocked down if the rents for the new building are going to be on average higher than what you knocked down.
And that would
That wouldn't be just
allow
political.
properties all
Well,
over the city to
you do
deteriorate. So
understand,
when-
But I feel
This is a really narrow, ED1 is really narrow. ED1, as broad as it seems, it's narrow in a different sense. All it does is say, there's no CEQA. It's not discretionary. It's ministerial. There's no process that you need to go through with few exceptions. And that is why people are picking some of these properties. They're knocking down properties that would otherwise not be allowed to be easily knocked down. For example, there would have to be a longer period of tenant relocation if they went through the normal discretionary process. That's the difference. So I feel that if it is a tenant occupied building, they shouldn't have the streamlining. They should just go through a regular process, even if they're gonna build. But I may be, and I'm a little, I mean, in other words, I'm much more concerned, frankly, with the tenants losing their homes
Well,
than I am with the
the
construction
way out of that
quickly
is
of new
to
homes.
put some kind of clause in it that they have to, within a 3-year period, find housing for the tenants which they're going to relocate at equal or lower rates.
Where have they been in the interim time?
No, they have to, before they begin, they have 3 years.
Before they began.
But then there's no streamlining. I
Correct.
mean, and so and the longer we delay building, the more expensive it's going to be and the harder it is going to be to have anything that approaches affordable. I mean, right now, the best efforts out there are coming up with unit prices of new construction that are, in excess of $500,000, and many of them are pushing $1 million per unit per construction. And that's not going to be affordable. And so it's, some of those costs we can't make go away. We can't force the land values down unless we want to start doing eminent domain and force people off the property, and
that doesn't really force the land values down anyway.
Although historically supposedly it did, but we can, what some cities have been able to show is by massive amounts of additional housing, you can bring rents down. Now, that won't bring it necessarily down in the range for everyone.
It won't bring them down.
Like Sydney,
It will
Australia had
stabilize
a
and
massive period of additional housing, and it brought the average rent down in Sydney by 30%. Sydney was one of the most expensive cities in the world. But you still need layered programs to make sure that you're preserving affordable housing, extremely low income housing, which we're doing. A lot of these brand new buildings, they're all taking all the extra bonuses and they're committing to 10% for extremely low income. So many of these new buildings guaranteed 10% extreme low income. But we can't force a developer to say, oh, I'll do 15% for low income, or I'll do 20% for workforce. So ED1 is supposed to, doesn't it have to be, the entire buildings are going to be
workforce housing.
Workforce and rent control.
Right.
But they'll come on at market, and then they'll be rent controlled going forward, isn't that?
Correct.
Correct, okay.
Correct.
So do houses fall under rent control?
No, they
Not exactly.
They don't. Single family houses on a lot is not rent controlled. If you build there's two, like if you add a second,
Except for if they're brand new, they're not anyway.
but there is a law that I think it's every 15 years, there's a rolling, did that pass?
There's a proposal,
Proposal.
but I don't know. Anyway, kind of looping us back to this, single-family homes in Los Angeles are not RSO, rent stabilization ordinance
Right.
properties. However, at the moment, they do have rent controls that have been recently imposed by the city council. And there is a statewide law
Rent
that
cap.
also
Sure.
imposes some rent controls on single-family homes. In the meantime, going back to this actual ordinance, what our council member Hernandez is saying, essentially that the city council itself will eventually incorporate robust tenant protections and anti-displacement measures in the official version of ED1, so that ordinance is working its way through, the actual final ordinance is working its way through the city council system, and she wants a temporary interim control ordinance, but only for Council District 1, to protect her constituents from displacement and homelessness until the implementation of proper regulations and land use land use controls are made. So this is going to be a longer discussion at City Council, but what her point is, it's kind of limited to 5 properties with 5 or more units. So in other words, not a duplex, not a single family house, but not a duplex or 4+. And or units that were vacated as a result of LS, so that some landlord took a building and emptied it, saying, I don't want to be in the rental business. Steve?
So
You went mute again.
Yeah. I'd like to make a motion, which is, I don't think we can control what happens with non-RSO units because it's at the discretion of the owner. So I would like to make a motion that we support Councilperson Hernandez's motion, make a recommendation to the board to support Councilwoman Hernandez's motion, but make it citywide, not specific to any geographic area within the city.
Yes.
As a way of protecting currently available affordable housing as mandated through RSO rules.
Okay, do you like her 5 or more units, or do we want to just say, we really just would want any RSO protected? We're a community with both kinds of housing.
Yeah. I guess, I don't know. I'm open
I can
to
figure out
discussion on that, but that's my motion as it is
The
right now.
city distinguishes between properties with 4 units or less and 5 or
Right,
more,
as do the lenders.
as do the lenders. And so if you have less than 5, there are certain,
Escape on many things.
there's not as much onerous regulations and fees and fee things if you're 4 and under. If you're 5 and above, you're considered, that's the break off. And
Right, but our zoning here in UNNC, in most neighborhoods except my own, except for Angeles Vista, primarily encourage the construction of no more than 4 units.
Yeah,
But we're proposing
nobody's
that
going
this
to
not
knock
be.
down a 4-unit to build another 4-unit,
Yeah.
because
Well, that's
that's not
also-
economic.
Well, ED1 doesn't have a unit limitation, actually.
So what's the 4 and 5?
Yeah, she does. I'd like to second,
Okay.
thank you very much for that motion, Steve. I'd like to second that.
Okay,
Thank you, Teresa. Unless someone wants to submit an amendment to the motion, we have a motion and a second.
okay, I
Next
agree,
discussion.
but we left it at the 5, that's my question.
Yes,
It was left at 5.
but geographically not
Geographic
restricted
expansion.
citywide.
Okay, so the main thing is the geographic expansion.
Yep.
Okay, is there any just further discussion? Okay, so now we do the voting affirmations real quick. I am voting, I live in Angeles Vista.
I'm voting, I live in West Adams Avenues.
I'm voting, I live in Western Heights.
I'm voting, I live in Western Heights.
I'm voting, I live in Jefferson.
Up there to Steve
I am voting. I live in Jefferson Park.
and Donna.
I'm voting. I live in West Adams Avenue.
Okay, all in favor, and we all don't have to do this again. All in favor of the motion on the floor to support to write a community impact statement to present to the board at our next governing board meeting to support this motion, this council motion but to expand it citywide. All in favor?
All in favor?
Any
Aye.
opposition? Okay, the motion passes unanimously. All right. The next one is oops, I haven't opened it yet. So the next motion is from Katie Yaroslavsky and Heather Hutt. So CDs 5 and 10, our own, to also do some restrictions for 81 based on the historic districts. So going to the top. So basically, this motion is limited. It's limited to the city's HPOZ plans. And what they're proposing is that essentially, to the extent there are objective standards in the HPOZ preservation plans, that they actually, the ED1 should not be on interim basis, and then presumably this will be incorporated in the final thing, should not be allowed to bypass the HPOZs. They should follow the HPOZ preservation plans. So I'm all for that. I just have a problem because this motion does not reference.
And I'm gonna just cut you off, Laura, by adding CPIOs and adding the other things, then we kind of water down and diminish the power of an HPOZ.
Really?
Yes.
Because you don't know exactly what I was going to
Okay.
say. Because I was going to say, by not mentioning North University Park, which is treated as an HPOZ by the planning department, but which is technically a specific plan, and by not mentioning the California and National Register districts, we've eliminated, these are all designated historic resources, unlike the CPIOs. So I think it needs to include
The historically
the
designated.
districts that have historic designation, which
Are there any-
CPIOs are.
Are there any districts in LA that have historic preservation, but they're only in ICO?
CPIO?
No, that are under an interim control ordinance, that they're
No.
acting like a preserved neighborhood,
No,
but they
no,
don't
no.
have an HPOZ.
No, it's that.
That's
it's
my
just that-
question.
Yeah,
And the
is that-
answer is no.
So not
Okay.
Country Club Park,
Country-
nothing in Griffith Park or other.
There at the moment, there are no historic neighborhoods pending designation. Is that what you're asking?
Yeah, that's like Jefferson
Yeah.
Park had an ICO before we had an HPOZ.
Yeah, no, there are no, they stopped doing that. That's why they're doing these CPIOs. They stopped doing the interim control ordinances pending designation. But the issue for me is that North University Park and there are other, I don't want to go through the list, but Flower Drive or Serrano Avenue. I mean, there are designated National Register districts or California Register districts that are designated.
I
and
would
which-
support both of, I would
Active.
support that.
I would support that.
Why do you think that that's not listed?
Because it says specifically HPOZ.
Right.
It's-
What- they
those
could
are
have
not-
said,
none
they
of
could have
those are-
said HPOZ and
I
CPIOs
can
and.
answer, oh, you wanna know the real answer?
Yeah.
Because Maria, the woman who's from United Neighbors,
Yes.
this is what she's been advocating. This language is exactly from that organization.
And that was what the ask was, but I
Yeah.
actually think.
I
that-
mean, in answer to your question, I've had discussions with them and they say, oh, yeah, maybe, but they're not changing their ask. And this is what they asked the mayor as well, this exact language.
I think,
Mhm.
I think it's important that certainly the HPOZs and historic
District.
districts that are already recognized and established shouldn't be.
Well, they shouldn't be excluded from CEQA, for God's
Yeah,
sakes. That's what ED1 does, says there's no more CEQA.
I mean,
And these are,
I guess my question also is Hakeem and Kimani and Andrew saw this language before they presented to Heather. And they could have certainly added that, and I'd like to know why
Right.
they didn't.
well, they met with Maria. This was the language she presented.
And even though Kimani,
Mhm.
Hakeem and Andrew know that we have these historic areas, designated areas around us, decided not to
Right.
include that.
Well, Steve has his hand raised, so let him raise his hand and then I will, if he hasn't
Okay.
answered, then I will answer.
I think Teresa is asking a really important question, but my conversations with CD10 leads me to believe that they're not thinking broadly. And that they may have missed that completely. And it's not unlike city staff to miss those kinds of nuanced issues, especially when they're presented with something by a powerful group or a group they consider to be powerful. So I have no problem supporting what Chris and Laura have stated, which is that if it's a designated historic area, whether it's the state, the city, the country, the cosmos, but if it's identified and designated, then it should be protected through this motion.
I think that even supports, gives strengths to HPOZs because we are also
Well, yes.
designated and recognized. And so, rather than peel people off in a death by 1,000 cuts, the fact that all of these are recognized and they've been approved and they have to be respected. And I think that actually gives more power to HPOC exemption.
Right. And also, this is a community impact statement, so what we're doing is commenting on a motion.
And maybe it'll force their conversation to open up. And if they have a solid reason, because there's some other protection we don't know about, then okay,
Right.
we're happy.
Steve?
So I'd like to make a motion that the committee recommend to the board that it support Councilwomen Yaroslavsky and Hutt's motion, but add to it other designated historic districts such as state or federally recognized districts.
I'm with that.
Does that mean it's a second?
I'll second that.
Okay. Because I'm not sure I'm with it.
I
I'd be
put it all
cool.
the time.
You have to use the technical language.
Okay.
Council speak.
So,
We have a second.
We
We have a
have a
motion
second.
on the floor.
right. So, is there any further discussion? Because if not, we can vote and maybe even have time to really look at that landscape ordinance.
Can I just add that I appreciate Teresa's concern, but I don't think we have time to go back to CD10 and ask them why anything was omitted. Because this has to get moving, it has to go to the board meeting. And we need
Yes,
to move on it.
I'm fine with it and I'm going to support it, but I feel that I don't want to also diminish our power. So when we say something, we want to advocate for that. So just writing a CIS and filing it in the portal and sitting back is not the way I think we should advocate. If we say something, then we
We
should
should also
follow
write
up
a
with
letter to.
and say, this, we want this, and we need to know why did you by chance
Yep.
overlook the importance of this?
Right, and
to
noting-
call them out on it.
Yeah, but
I'm
noting they were the second, they were not the mover.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
they could have just said.
I'm with you, Teresa. There has to be
Yeah.
follow-up.
I agree.
Right, but they could have just said, I'm down with that.
I'm not gonna leave that out.
Yeah,
Okay,
sounds good. We
motion
have
and a
this-
second. Motion and a second.
Okay,
Call for the
Okay,
vote.
all in favor, please indicate by raising your hand digitally or for real. Okay, and is there any opposition? Donna, I didn't see a hand one way or the other.
I'm having trouble with that, but my hand is raised.
Okay, thank you, passed unanimously, all right. And now we have the proposed, this is you or me? You
How
wanna
do you want to do it?
Well, why don't you start, I did go to a presentation, have you been to a presentation?
I've had two at CFAC. So
Perfect.
they came to us before they did this, then they came
Okay.
back last week.
So, and do you want me to put up the slides?
I'm sure.
Okay,
So, a couple of years ago, when I joined the board, we had a project that was pending at Crenshaw and Obama, the Crenshaw Crossing 800-unit Metro Joint Development Plan. And there were, and there still is, it hasn't been taken down yet, a grove of protected sycamore trees. And a colleague and I, who were both on the Community Forest Advisory Committee, went to them with some concerns about the removal of these trees. And we went through the motions, there was an appeal, we tried to preserve the trees. We lost because in the end, we did come in a little bit late. The project had started in 2018. We didn't bring this concern until
4 weeks before the dead end.
Yes, so anyway, we drafted a motion and my colleague on CFAC is with CD8. She presented it to the council member who put forth a motion 150499S2, which required that urban forestry review trees early in the process. Because the way it is now is that the planning gets designed, everything goes through planning, and then it goes to urban forestry and says, oh, we want to remove these trees. And urban forestry really doesn't have the power to override that. So with that motion, it required city planning, urban forestry, Bureau of Street Services, Department of Building and Safety, all to address the removal of trees early in the process. So what has been transpired the past couple of years is planning has updated the design, landscape and design ordinance and made some changes. So I'm just gonna speak about it from the perspective of trees, but maybe Laura can talk about some of the other.
Right, so that's
nuances.
so I went to their most recent iteration of the presentation that they're making. There will be a public hearing on the ordinance maybe in July. On the website, it says September, but they said on last Saturday, July, so probably that means August. I don't know. And so I'm gonna launch the share screen. Oops. But I think Teresa and I, having not practiced, because I don't even know if she's seen this presentation.
Laura, I have it right here.
Oh,
I
you
told
do.
you, they brought it to us at
Oh, okay.
CFAC and
Right.
did 2 presentations. They got our feedback and then they came back.
Great.
So,
Okay, why is this doing this? Ugh, how do I get rid of this? Not that way.
just,
Oh, there we go. Okay,
I don't know what it says.
so I think I need to make this a little smaller and I need to somehow X this out. Go. All right,
And
or not.
I don't know how you started that. Just slide them.
And I'm going to hide caption. Okay, here we go. All right, so this is a general overview, a holistic report. So essentially what they're doing now is making this a very bureaucratic ordinance.
I disagree. That is very negative, Laura, and I disagree. That it is a point system that, of 100 different items, you have to accumulate at least 27. And it is, in my perspective, it is a way to preserve trees. If you keep the trees on site, you get points. If you remove trees, you are deducted points. So it also becomes an objective regulation, not subjective, the way we have seen things go through planning. One planner does this, another planner does that. These are objective layers of points that help planning get approval. Also, there's many departments have to go and are part of the clearances that are required, including urban forestry. So all these departments have to sign off before it's even approved and planning. So to me, I think it's a great idea. Yep. So go ahead.
Well, what I meant was they're using language like people first design.
Oh.
You know, it's like, okay, not sure what that is.
Warm and fuzzy.
It is, to address neighborhood walkability, health, the built environment. Steve, hang on one sec, and connecting buildings to their setting. I mean, in other words, these are the slides. Steve?
Could you go back to the previous slide, please?
Sure, 2 previous now, right?
Yeah.
This one, that one?
I think it's the one before that. Here you go. It says shift to objective design standards.
Yes,
Teresa
right.
or Laura, do you know what they mean by objective design standards?
Yeah,
Because in the
it's
HPOZ world, it's essentially removing any standards.
Well, in the HPOZ world, it's removing standards because all of the preservation plans didn't have, you shall do this, you shall do that. Because remember, we all were encouraged to give it flexibility.
The city
like-
said they would not approve a plan that indicated shall or must.
Right, because they gave flexibility. Then the state legislature passed some laws that require objective standards instead of subjective standards.
And that was
So
in the
this-
housing element.
Well, it was on everything, but so this new
So in this
ordinance,
context, what is an objective standard,
well,
for example?
the rest of the ordinance is gonna have the objective standards. This ordinance itself will have objective standards.
You have an
and
idea of
that's-
what one might look like for an example?
Yes,
Is that,
We're not
there are 9
yet.
No, go ahead.
No, I just-
You've got
we're
the
not
intel.
there yet.
Oh,
Just
you've
say-
got the
we're just not there yet, that's right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Let's see if we can find it. So there's gonna be procedures, point system, organization of the standards into groups, she'll tell you, Teresa will tell you, and then verification and enforcement.
Okay,
Yeah.
let's hold off and see if we get there, please. I'm
Okay.
sorry I interrupted.
Right, and then, so the first thing is, objectively, it's gonna only apply for new construction of 5 units or more. There's that 5 units
Yeah,
again.
5 units and non-residential. I mean, yeah, not for residential, not now, anyway. This is not.
Just
like-
commercial.
Just commercial, 5 units or more.
Right, and what this slide tells us, it exempts temporary uses, additions, alterations, changes of use of existing buildings, surface parking, but maintenance only. I'm not sure we're gonna ultimately think that's a good idea. I mean, why not, when you're gonna do maintenance, find a place to put a tree? And we do agree that historic cultural monuments should probably be exempt.
Okay, what is it asking, Laura? Just go to notification setting and just turn it off. Can you just say, do not just, I don't know what it's asking.
I don't either, but I don't think I wanted to do what I
Okay.
just did.
Just go back to the account. Go to the top and see if you can just.
I can see it just fine.
So what are you seeing? Because what we're
I'm
seeing.
seeing the slide, unobstructed
No,
slide.
no,
Yeah, we are having a different problem.
just go here, Laura. Just-
Okay. And how do I get out? Yes.
Just go back to Zoom, see if you can just click on the Zoom.
I know, it really screwed it up.
You can go to more. Oh, that's for the Zoom, right?
Okay, I'm gonna stop the share for a minute and bring it back.
You go to settings.
And minimize this, get it out of there. Bring this back, sorry.
There it is.
Right. All right. So, and I'm still gonna try and move this a little bit. Okay. And then I want to move to the next slide. Okay, so this process improvement is going to,
Don't worry about it.
Just
It goes
keep
away
talking, just
again.
go to the top, keep on topic.
okay, is going to put it into the administrative review, aligning it with the new zoning code. The process will, as Teresa mentioned, improve the workflow and the interdepartmental coordination, establishing a framework for point system, and that show how there's many specific ways to achieve compliance through both mandatory and elective points. And so, for example, tree disclosure, you know, they get a point for actually providing the tree disclosure statement. And that's actually in and of itself a point. These are the concepts that have been adopted a while ago, that they do pedestrian first design, 360-degree design, meaning what it looks like on all sides, and more climate adapted design. These are concepts in a different plan.
So,
Go ahead.
I was gonna say, these are the beginning of the objective standards.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
So for pedestrian first design, you have direct access from the sidewalk, minimize driveway widths and locations, promote stair usage, establish street tree requirements, and a tree guarantee fee. So the requirement they're now proposing is 1 tree for every 30 feet. That was as of Saturday. I don't know what they told you.
right, that's it.
And $2,600 as the fee for in lieu, if you can't
The
rent
in
a
lieu
tree.
fee, if you can't, then you, because your space is,
Was it work, you have to,
you have to pay that.
Right.
And the objective is to plant that in the local area, and sometimes you're unable to do that.
Right, well, I did make a comment at the presentation that I thought 2,600 was too little. Because we know how
Agreed.
much it actually cost, well, we know what it
The oldest
costs.
values its trees for about 4,000.
Well, that, Beverly Hills.
Oh, Beverly Hills.
Well, it's because we need 5 years of watering and the standards are 33 times a year and it costs now $16 per time if you're using one of the organizations. So you can add that up and that is more than $2,600, clearly. per tree.
Right, but if you're talking about, for example, a $5 to $10 million building,
Uh-huh,
spending $2,600 per tree to not plant some trees that are going to cause you aggravation in the building process is pennies,
correct.
right? So you want to make that fee large enough to dissuade people from trying to skate around planting trees.
Well, that's a point. So Teresa, I think, because you've
But
got meetings-
$2,600 isn't enough.
Correct.
Yeah. I
So,
think the avoided cost needs to be higher.
Yes.
well, I mean, what did CPAC say about that? So what's, I think Steve is saying is like, if you know it's 5,000 for real money, maybe it should be 50,000 to avoid paying real money or not. I don't know.
Or until 15,000.
Well, I think mostly we don't want them to not plant trees.
Right.
Right,
Cannot-
and so you want to
And
disincentivize.
right, we want to disincentivize because what we really want are the trees. And then I'm also concerned that I don't think this so far provides for any sort of bond so that 10 years down the road, if the tree has disappeared, do you replace the tree? Like we saw at Jefferson and Crenshaw.
I think that there will be something in the portal, because they're designing a new portal, that there will be, and I don't know what it is, if it's a drop down or whatever it is, but there is a way that you will be able to go back in and look at it. And I don't know if it's gonna be a bond, drop down tab, but there'll be a way to still hold them accountable for the maintenance of those trees for the long term.
Okay, because somebody, not me, asked that question. They didn't say Jefferson and
Right.
Crenshaw. And Ken seemed to think there isn't anything in there.
Ken Bernstein?
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm just saying.
Yeah.
But it was Ken and Michelle Levy.
Well, Michelle, that's who met with us.
Yeah.
So she would, if she didn't comment on that, or did Ken overstep?
Well, I can't say if he
Okay.
Can I
overstepped
make
her.
a suggestion regarding that point? Because I think it's a really important one. If maintenance isn't included as part of their overall presentation, then we should comment on it. Doesn't matter what was said in the meeting. If it's not here in the presentation, then it's not there.
But after 5 years, trees become the responsibility of the city. Public right-of-way trees after 5 years, that's why they push for a 5-year establishment care period, because at that point, it becomes the responsibility of the city. So it doesn't make a difference if it's
But
owned.
I don't understand that. It becomes the responsibility of the city, but the city tells you that you're the first person that has to have something to do with that tree. They are second.
Yes, but it is their, trees are an infrastructure that grows in value and it becomes part of the city's maintenance plan, the long-term maintenance plan
But I'm
of the
still not
canopy.
understanding if they're saying that the person that lives there or has business there is the first person that has to do the work on the tree. They are second, regardless of what, even cutting it down.
They are the first person for the first 5 years. Then after that, they have no legal
That
responsibility.
is not what they told us when they started planting trees on our street.
What did they tell you?
They told us that those trees are our responsibility, they are second. They will put it in, they will put the one in that we want, but it is our responsibility.
This is in the parking meeting.
So that tree is probably planted by a community group, KYCC, LECC. They plant on behalf of the city. They get grants to also plant. They identify the areas, there's a grid that says that these tree wells are available for planting. They go to the homeowner and they say, hey, we want to plant this tree here, but you're going to be required for maintaining it. But it's really for 3 years, it should be 5 years for the homeowner to maintain it, but then after that, it belongs to the city. The parkway trees belong to the city after 5 years.
Because the parkway belongs to the
Okay,
city.
well, here, I want to go back though. Remember Steve said, what's an objective standard, right? That was question. So when we look at, I'm bringing it up again, Jefferson and Crenshaw, that shopping center, in their conditional use permit, it actually stated they are to plant and maintain trees that will have a 30-foot canopy, and instead the trees are gone. The objective standard in that case was plant and maintain, I mean, that was an objective standard. It was plant and maintain trees that have a 30-foot canopy. They chose magnolias, we know what happens to magnolias in this climate, I'm sure they didn't kill them.
Is there any mechanism to
So-
hold their feet to maintain the
Well,
standard?
I'm saying that situation brings up this question to me for now an ordinance, well, that'll be citywide, if there should be something objective in it that requires them to replace trees if they don't
Thrive.
If they're not thriving the first 5 years, then yes, but why not have an ordinance that, or support an ordinance that clearly states that after 5 years, those trees are the responsibility of the city. That way, we're not depending on the owner of a building who may leave or who has, a shopping Burger King or dollar store. Any trees that have exceeded the 5-year establishment period now are the responsibility of the city. So now we know who to go to if something is wrong.
It also suggests, since there's clear objectives, that because of these pre-sign-off and reviews, that the trees that go in would be well chosen for that site, to trees that within 5 years with proper maintenance should be well established and should have a very high ratio of success. Because that's the thought went into the front end, instead of people putting down a tree 15 years later, the sidewalks going out
And that's why urban forestry will approve that in the
From the
beginning. And if KYCC or another planting group is maintaining that for the first 5 years, that 5-year period, they give it a prune,
Well,
And then now it's set for the next, because of the city pruning cycle now is 17 and a half years,
Okay.
which is ridiculous. So it needs to be established at that 5-year mark, pruned properly. Oh, sorry about that. And then,
so see, I'm almost thinking out loud that it should be the person who's building the building's responsibility the first 5 years, and that's when they should also pay for years 6 through 10, a fee to
whom?
city approved nonprofits who do the tree maintenance, and then before turning it over to the city itself.
A fee designated for tree maintenance.
Yeah, so we get 10 years out of the damn tree. I don't know. And it's
Okay.
just a thought. I mean, I'm just really concerned about the idea of turning all of these lovely trees over to the city, because in theory, the trees that have disappeared were turned over to the city. And we're not seeing maintenance on them, the current ones that aren't being maintained. I'm trying, I know that sounded very negative, but they're not.
Well, if these are big commercial developments,
Mhm.
then when these trees go in, they will have root buffers, they will have irrigation systems that go to these trees. It won't be like the million trees that just went into the ground, not necessarily
True.
irrigation. So, I mean, if the permitting process is as organized as you detailed, there will be the infrastructure for the tree. The tree will be well chosen for the site. The tree should, they're responsible for 5 years, and they have to have the supports out by 5 years because the tree should need them.
Right.
And there should be some kind of checkoff or that has to happen at that transfer time, so that, because the city is now inventorying all their trees.
Right.
And so they should come out and measure the girth and log in the tree and it goes into their database. And if we want to have a reasonable flat fee that's paid at that transfer point for maybe 5,000 per tree, so the city has some pool, then fine, but it should be a punitive amount of money.
No,
Yeah,
I'm not
It should
saying.
be something that reflects the actual costs. And in 5 years, the cost should be less than it is in this first 5 years, because you don't,
Well, because it
Right.
may have automatic water.
and you
So
got a
it's more
5-year
just
tree.
about
there's-
weeding and
Yeah,
Which are now
maintenance.
established and drought tolerant.
Right.
Right.
Or at least
Okay.
not appropriate.
Well, I'm just saying, so we might want to look at some sort of additional mechanism. Moving on, context sensitive, we haven't got very far. Context sensitive design is something we've been asking for years, right? When people come to us, don't just show us the design, show us what's next to it. That's, got to show that on plans. And screened and reduced vehicle
Or
parking.
reduced.
Or reduced. Well, it should be and/or, I mean, even if you have fewer spaces, it should still be screened. Okay. What's happening here? Okay. So Teresa,
all my stuff. Yeah.
Teresa, do you know, are there a lot more points for trees or a lot more points for climate resilient buildings? Do you have any?
I have the point
Information on that.
system, I've highlighted the things for the trees, so if you,
Well, they're saying number 5 is climate resistant buildings, climate responsive designs, passing.
Resilient buildings.
Resilient.
My
Not
question to
resistant.
Teresa is closer to the action items.
yeah.
Is in this 27 of 100 points, do you feel that the trees and the greening get enough emphasis that they will be well served with if someone always goes for the lowest number of points?
Yes, I do,
Okay, because that to me, that's, you know,
because
you don't just get a couple green shrubs in a box and they get
No.
checked off and they're out of there. Okay,
it's preservation first, so you get points for preservation, you get points for planting additional trees.
Okay.
You get deducted if you want, if it's a significant tree, certainly a protected tree, just city council, public works, there's an ordinance, there's a tree protective ordinance. And if you cut down protected trees, there can be not only fines, but you can be restricted from actually building on that site. It's only been activated one time. It was a commercial developer who cut down coast live oaks, who knew it, and he was restricted from developing that site for 10 years. So
But what happened yesterday at city council?
I'm gonna tell you.
Okay.
I'm just setting the stage, that it's only happened one time. It only happened one time, and that was a while ago. So, a few months ago, well, over a year ago, somebody in the northern part of Hollywood Hills had a parcel, and he was told that he had protected black walnuts, 7 black walnuts, and coast live oaks by the community. And he cut them down, and they videotaped them, and it was sent to Urban Forestry, Street Services, the overseeing umbrella, and they fined him and fined him by telling him that he'd be unable to develop his parcel for 7 years.
10 years, yeah.
7 years, in this case, it was 7 years.
Okay.
But Public Works, Mike Davis,
Well, it was the chair of Public Works
Yeah.
apparently.
yes,
Overrode it.
yes, but by the third meeting, they finally got themselves together and said, well, he's from England, he didn't know, and a whole bunch of other
Shit, in
people.
England, they have much
A whole bunch of BS. I say England, I don't know where this accent is. It's either that or Australian, but the point is. But the point is, they reduced it to 2 years it's already
In 2 years.
been a year. It's been a year.
We got
But-
credit.
A credit, because it's already been a year that he's been going through this process because he appealed the fine.
So he made them look stupid.
Well, no. CD4, whose name I can't. Nithya Raman went to city council and said, I am asking for 245, which is when the city council has the ability to,
Take a matter.
yes, to grab jurisdiction over any of the departments. So they voted yes. So now it's gonna go back to Public Works. And they have to revise what they're gonna do. And, Urban Forestry put forth a really good plan. They had all the details and everything. And that's why they asked for such a severe penalty of 7 years.
They
So.
just waved it away, huh?
Yeah, but now it's gone back, so I'm sure they're pretty
It went back-
humiliated that
it went
city
back-
council grabbed their jurisdiction.
It went back with a message.
Right,
Right.
Yeah.
yes,
Right.
so,
So, okay, how we
yes,
got there, I
feel
don't
like
know.
that.
That's progress, that's
yeah.
progress,
It
yeah.
needs to happen.
Okay, so that's for illegal cutting down of protected trees. This ordinance also now adds in significant trees, and that's trees with a
a
12-inch?
A 12-inch diameter, yeah,
A girth.
Yeah.
it's called DBH.
12 inches, like that. Okay. But I asked the question, what percentage of the points are for climate resilient building?
Yeah, okay, I don't know, what number is that, Laura?
Number
3,
5,
5, because I just have the,
because you have the grid. I have the presentation and you have the words.
I only have the one for
I
trees.
reckon that's,
Okay,
that's
so
gotta be
So I
another
don't have
20,
5.
it's gotta be another
It's got
27.
one would think. Okay, because healthy soil and water quality would probably not be that many points.
No.
Wait a
Conservation,
minute, I do have that, healthy soil, you get 1 point for that, that's
Okay.
3.4.
so that's number 8 on
Oh,
this.
no, it's what, on the ordinance part.
Oh, I don't know, I'm on,
Oh,
look,
okay.
look, I've got, I'm on a slide. This is a user-friendly, consumer-friendly slide that doesn't reference the ordinance number.
Let me just see what, okay, go ahead.
Well, so these are the things, Steve and Donna, and anyone who's watching on YouTube, that are the different categories. So conservation, the other thing I just said, and biodiversity and habitat, which is probably a good thing to give a
Yes.
lot of points to.
Do coyotes count?
You can get a total of 2 points for biodiversity and habitat.
All. Okay.
Well,
What's the only
these are, if
27?
you meet the mandatory standards, the mandatory standards, you get 2 points.
Uh-huh.
The applicable standards, you don't get any. Maximum points are 9. This is for biodiversity and habitat.
Because biodiversity and
Calculated.
habitat would be native plants,
Yes.
native trees, but also native plants. Yeah. And
Maybe
limit,
bioswales, I mean, it
Yeah.
could be several things.
limiting artificial turf. Okay, let's see what else. And then they have health-related standards. Well, you don't get points for being near a freeway, I guess. So do you get points for not being near a freeway? I mean, you're either near a freeway or you're not.
You have no choice.
Well, you do. As a developer, you either bought the place or you didn't buy the place. But once you have a project on a lot, that's where your lot is, unless somebody puts a freeway in afterwards. Okay.
Did you say creative public realm improvements? What did you say? Security fences?
I didn't say anything about that.
Okay.
I had said healthy soil and water quality, site amenities, that's probably, I don't know. I mean, these are just slides where they were talking and I don't have their recording, sorry.
And I have everything on the
Right,
trees.
all right. And now they're creating an online worksheet. And so this is just an example of that, which
Which is great, because now it helps, if you're gonna, you're a developer, you need to go in, you wanna find out what,
You can find it ahead of time and you can,
Figure it out.
and then
Yes.
people can reference, you look at your project and they can keep track of what you're doing.
yes, and all of the departments can look at it and say, oh, well, wait a second, you didn't do this, you didn't do that, we're not going to approve this until you make these changes to your design.
right.
Is there
Okay, so-
anything in this plan regarding rooftops, either planting rooftop trees or gardens or requiring solar panels as an alternative?
So,
I'm gonna stop this share.
It seems to me, so I do a lot of hiking in Los Angeles. I like to go to the Hetzler place up there near Culver City. I look down on the city and all I see are these rooftops. There's no solar panels, there are no gardens, there are no trees on the rooftops. This is an untapped resource to try to offset the climate deficit that these buildings create.
How big are these rooftops?
well, let me just give you some examples here. And I maybe page 15, Laura.
Of what I'm looking at now?
Yes, I think page 15.
Okay,
Let's see.
well, I
So-
haven't shared this one yet. This is the point system.
Right, this is the point system. So if there's a solar-ready rooftop, this project maximizes rooftop areas for photovoltaic panels by installing solar above the building's mechanical equipment, blah, 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 blah. You get 1 point for that. If you have a living roof, This project's landscape plan specifies installation of continuous or tray module living roof for at least 50% of the areas located on the rooftops and the podium areas. The vegetated roof shall comply with LAMC section 57, blah, blah, blah. You get a point for that.
Is 2 points the maximum you can get on any given item?
No, let me just go back. I don't think we're doing a good job explaining this, Steve. There's a possibility of 100 points.
Yeah.
You only need 27. So when you're designing your project, you can say, oh, you know, I'm gonna have a roof deck and I'm gonna have modular panels for greening on top. If you have that in the design, you're gonna get a point for that. If you have, I don't know, air conditioning monitoring, you can get 2 points for that. I'm focusing on the trees, but there are many ways to accumulate these points.
And is 27 the minimum,
It's the minimum,
The minimum,
not the maximum?
no,
the minimum.
the minimum. You can go to
So-
100.
So
You
you can get 27% and that passes.
And is that sufficient?
Well,
Right.
there's mandatory things. There's already
Yeah,
mandatory.
there are already things that are mandatory.
This is
Okay.
this is frosting on the cupcake. The mandatory everybody has to hit, but this is an incentive thing where they can get extra points and get, you know,
Right.
maybe beneficial.
And let me say this, all of this material, and it's quite dense, some of it, is in the agenda packet. I wasn't really thinking we were gonna take a vote to go to the board tonight. I mean, we should, you know, what we can even do is have, you know, Michelle's willing to talk to people. They're doing,
Oh, we can invite her.
I think
I
this
can-
is
To
not
UNNC, that'd be great.
Yeah,
That'd be great.
I mean, if there are other things that people are interested in, I just want to focus on the trees, what we can do to preserve them.
Yep.
But if there are other things, we
Right.
want to talk about solar panels or building construction or cool roofs or.
Right.
So
Well-
if this had been in place, there is absolutely no way that project could have gotten approval with
which project?
it threatens the sycamore.
It may have, because you can get a permit to remove a protected tree.
Okay, but they would have had to go through that process. There
yes.
would have been that review.
They would have
Yes.
they would have had to
identify UFD or the Public Works, the Bureau of Public Works, Department of Public Works.
And there may
Bureau
have
of
been
Public
some
Works.
heavy duty horse trading for other trees to come to the community
Now-
for that to happen.
Right, now they're already, the Crenshaw Crossing, they're gonna plant 157 trees.
Yeah.
And it's gonna be around if there are sufficient amount of tree wells, because they're not gonna be able to fit them all on that site. So I just wanna call it out that they are gonna plant trees. But yes, there would have been a stronger regulatory process for getting approval for that.
And this
And there
would-
would have been an opportunity for the community to come out, for other tree advocates to come out.
well, then that's fair and balanced,
Yeah.
and I would say.
Well, what would be interesting to do, I think, I'm gonna stop this screen share, because again, I think we should, myself included, read all of this, it's just a lot of material.
And have her come and
Well,
have a
we'll
presentation.
try that, but it would be interesting, for example, to take a look at Gramercy Apartments, because we've gotten quite familiar with it, and see how many points it would have gotten. Right, it retained trees, it has solar, it has a vegetable garden.
Well, did it have any well, we talk about, yes, it kept the street trees.
Kept the street, and it added some more on Gramercy and Wilton, added some.
Were there,
No, it'd
there
be
were no-
interesting to just, since it's a building we're familiar with, we don't have to ask their permission, we should see how many points they would get. Because that would tell us what a kind of good building gets in this system.
so.
I agree,
so-
a case study in our community would be helpful.
Because then we know what we're looking at.
But this looks like a big leap forward.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh.
and-
And it is, we can see that it's objective in some sense, but I mean, I haven't read the ordinance itself, because the problem with all these ordinances, I mean, every time, just every time, is the unintended consequences. Like, what did they do that creates a loophole? And they always do, and I don't know that we could read this and find the loophole.
Well, it's possible to make things foolproof,
Yes.
because fools are so ingenious.
But, yes.
Well, if you want, I can invite Michelle Levy to come and
Yeah.
share.
That'd be great. And since this is all on we can go.
Well, yeah, first of all this material's in the,
Right,
Packet, we can all read it, because it's a pretty big
yeah,
stack.
yes. Well, I wanted to just go over the
Sure.
things with the trees, so
Seems
that's
like
all.
inherently.
No, I'm not trying to cut us off.
idea.
Well, it is
I-
late, it's.
It is late and
Yeah.
there were two
Let's
quick other things.
Focus on the trees.
What, we don't have to respond, we can, are we having another meeting soon, or what?
Well, Astrid did not respond to me about, I reached out to see is this room available any other day this month. I haven't heard back yet, so I'll call her.
Okay, well, she was sick, last week she was sick.
I'm
so-
not mad.
Okay,
I mean, I asked the question and then I thought, what am I talking about? I have jury duty next week. My niece is getting married on Memorial Day weekend. I wanna go to CPF. What night do I have?
all right.
But that said,
I'm just glad to be back in my career. I was sick for
you know,
stupid long.
but, and I don't even know for UNNC, we have the CERT training, the neighborhood disaster preparedness
Yes,
thing, but I don't know what is the topic this June, the June one, and maybe you and I don't go. Maybe we just find other people to go so that the room's not empty. And we do this meeting on our normal night,
okay.
unless it happens to be the one that's most interesting. We have to look at the schedule. But you never know what's the most interesting.
And here's another example, let me just tell you as I'm going through this. So right now, there are no protections for a construction zone for trees. In Santa Monica, you have to put up the orange fencing, we don't have that.
Around the trees.
Around the tree. But in this ordinance, if you do that, you get 2 extra points. If you agree to do that, you will get 2 extra points.
So not just protect them, but water them during 2 years of construction.
The,
One would hope.
The project guarantees a tree protection plan during demolition, grading, construction, measures to protect the critical root zone and tree protection zone for every existing to remain significant tree identified on the tree survey, the tree report. So
Right, so, but this is the loophole. This is what I'm saying. And to water.
Laura, if it's those fig trees on Gramercy, you don't have to water those trees, but they do need to be protected
Right.
while the construction is going on.
Yeah.
The trees are
Massive.
30 years old, so they don't need to be watered. That's not a loophole. If it's an established tree, it doesn't need to be
But
watered.
it doesn't even mature.
But it does need the roots on it, not just the 4x4.
You don't need a
but-
backhoe cutting off the roots.
Yes, it needs to be
No,
in
right,
the root zone, the critical root zone. So,
okay.
yeah. Anyway, okay, keep going. I was just looking through here.
Well-
trying to get somebody to.
Okay, so the marching orders on this is try to read some more and see if Michelle can come and also see when we're having our meetings, so
To be continued.
to be continued, because it may be the mid-June meeting if we can't do the first of June, first weekend in June. And I know you might not be here. Okay, so the other thing on the agenda is follow-up to previous cases, ENS, old business, discussion, possible action. And again, the one I put on the agenda was not meant that we would actually take an action, a real action, but this is, I'm gonna say it out loud for the record, case number ZA 2014-4751, CU PA1, PA is plan approval number 1. For the addresses 2366 through 2368 and 2400 West Washington Boulevard. And what that is, we met with them a month ago. This is the Wilshire Tow company. And they have been headquartered with dispatch at 2400 West Washington since the 60s or 70s. And they used to own the lot across the street on Washington where Gramercy Apartments is now. And that was the remote lot for their police tow operation. This, in my case, it was the first set of hearings I ever went to for any land use matter ever
Okay.
after I moved in 1983, because they were such a nuisance, used 2 owners ago.
Right.
To, not the current owner. And the city imposed major conditions on their staying on that lot, and it involved, not driving through the local residential streets, not allowing people to repair the cars that had been towed, they pull them out, they don't drive, that's why they were towed there in the first
And
place.
they start working on that.
They were working them in the middle of the street, in other words, stop all the things. And none of the conditions actually worked very well. And eventually the Community Redevelopment Agency, which had the project area on Washington, purchased the lot. And as part of the deal, found an alternative lot on Gage for the quote remote, now it really was remote, police towing operation. So how a police towing operation works, some of the vehicles that are towed are needed for police investigations.
Yep.
So those stay in sight line of the dispatcher, so they're on the premises. And some vehicles that are towed are $200,000 vehicles, so those stay in sight lines of the dispatcher, and they have on that yard, the existing yard at 2400, they have an elevator kind of system, so there's some stacked cars toward the rear of the lot. But the random, you're parked on La Brea after 4 o'clock kind of tows, or your car doesn't move for 3 weeks from wherever, tows, we're going to Gage in an actually properly zoned industrial zone. So what's happened is, back here on Washington Boulevard, the property, 2 parcels to the east of the existing 2400, so the building that was Alpine building, and a parcel that used to have an apartment house on it was demolished and had been used without apparently any permits as the customer and patron parking, but as not as a parking lot for storing vehicles. It was patron and employee parking, but it doesn't even have a certificate of occupancy as a parking of any sort because they never got it. They just never did it. So that became available for rent to the gentleman who runs Wilshire Tow, and he entered into a lease agreement, moved the operation, but hasn't given up Gage yet. I'm crossing fingers he's smart enough to keep the Gage parcel. And then after he moved the operation, he applied for an amendment to his existing conditional use permit, but the existing conditional use permit was only for the dispatch operation and wasn't for all of those other things.
So he's in a no man's land, he has no right to
Well,
ask for the.
I feel comfortable tonight only asking for permission, if that's the right word, from this group to draft a letter that we would then vote on at this committee, but invite them back to discuss. So draft them, meaning the owners of
Wilshire Tow.
Wilshire Tow.
Yeah.
They're not here.
They came
They
previously.
came,
No, I just.
And he tried to justify, I didn't have the impression that he was going to give up Gage. I think he's trying to expand his business, keep Gage, but also use that secondary lot for additional storage of cars.
well, and he's doing auctions, and then
Yeah,
but Roger, at the UNNC's homelessness liaison committee meeting, Roger Estrada from Council District 10 was happy because now Wilshire Tow also owns one of those, the big towing vehicles that can tow the RVs. And I said, oh, please don't tow the RVs into the Washington site next to residents in an apartment building overlooking it, please. I don't know, but it's like, I don't know what he's going, in other words, none of this information is anywhere.
right. So we should deny him
Well, at minimum, so what
At least hear what he has to say.
well, we heard what he had to say,
It's
but we
encouraging.
learned that he hadn't shared full information
Yeah.
with his own land use representative.
Mhm.
So that person did not know there was a prior conditional use permit relative to the operation across the street. And he also did not know that they're now holding the weekly auctions of vehicles nobody claimed here on Washington Boulevard instead of at Gage. So I have sent the photos to the land use rep, and I have sent the prior conditional use permit, with all of the long list of conditions to that guy. So at minimum, those conditions need to apply.
Right, yes.
Okay, we've got to, and we're running out of time, we have 6 minutes, so, but I don't feel comfortable passing a motion to all that effect. I think, I just want sort of acquiescence that it's proper to prepare a draft letter and bring it to the next meeting, which may well be June 5th.
So he thinks he's playing everybody, huh?
But if we invite them to come back, we should insist that his land rep and the owner attend.
Yeah, they were physically present.
Okay, so they,
It was just the land use rep was like, huh? It's like,
Wait,
yeah, because he didn't know, he just didn't know everything.
okay.
Yeah.
I support the plan.
Okay, and
Good
then
idea.
and the other thing I just want to report, because there's nothing, I don't think that we can do about it, but I would like to do something. I ended up at a meeting today at 1808 South St. Andrew's Place. So you may remember back in June of 2021, we happily got a presentation from them, and again, it's in the packet. This is the historic Craftsman House on St. Andrews.
The two structures behind it.
Yes, where the applicant will be building permanent supportive housing, 20 units total, down from 22 that we were talking about. But it's, however many, they're building a building behind in the rear of the lot, and then basically doing a gut renovation of unfortunately, of the interior to make more apartments in this house. But what we were presented was the preservation of the exterior. And what I found out today is not even close,
Okay.
not even close. They're replacing, Building and Safety has said they have to replace all of the shingles with new shingles made of fireproof or somebody, I mean, in other words, so the wood shingles are going, but the big picture window is now 2 doors, all the other windows are to be removed. I mean, it's like, what, this is nothing, it's just not.
Not good.
And it was approved, it was signed off by the planning department's
Based on what was
CPIO.
presented.
I don't know what they signed off on. What we were presented showed the windows. I mean, do I have time to pull that up? I don't.
Yeah, no, I remember. And I thought the whole, was based on what they presented,
Right,
I thought it was a very, because they were preserving the
right.
street elevation and exterior of the house, that the project was a
I
win-win
didn't
in
mean to
terms
do
of supportive housing, but kept the streetscape and the historic element.
Sounds to me like they need to be buying some windows.
They're not gone yet.
But
But-
they're proposing.
Oh, no,
It's a
they're
switch.
to be gone by Monday.
Oh,
Wow.
Jesus.
And so they're willing to salvage it. I mean, in other words, I'm a little back and forth already as of today's meeting. It's like, oh, this is not what you showed us. So this is the house. And where that big picture window ends up being 2 doors because there's 2 apartments and an office. And they didn't even think about that in the design, because obviously the right answer would have been enter through that big front door,
Right.
just like that,
And
and
then
make
go
a
away.
vestibule, yes, exactly.
Well, I thought we had a floor plan that was shown us, and it had that kind of interior layout.
Well, look,
Because I remember looking,
whoop.
yeah, I remember they showed us.
But this is what they showed us, see, the windows
Yeah.
are present, not absent.
No, they're present.
Exactly. And then, but
Bait and switch.
no, not well, yes and no. Because if we look closely, you do see there on the front porch,
A door,
the 2 doors.
the 2 doors. I see
And
a
so
second door.
so we didn't interpret
So the
it, we did
rendering-
not.
The rendering didn't match
Match.
the plan.
Plans.
Correct. However, but they also have made so many decisions. So if you look at where it says Unit 1 at the top left.
Does that say 292 square
Yeah, they're
feet?
teeny little apartments.
Oh
It's
my
permanent
God.
supportive housing. But
That's
where,
homeless
but,
housing, right?
but the other thing is
But
they're
just
putting,
people have
they're putting all the
strong medical
electrical,
needs in the-
trying to tell you guys something.
Okay, so.
Where it says Unit 1, 292 square feet, and then it has whatever that is, bed, I don't know what that is. But above it, so outside, that's where all the electric is going, so there's not gonna even be any window there,
Oh,
right? Because the electric is coming up 8
But you
feet
can't have a
from
bedroom
ground.
without a window.
No, it's gonna be on the front, so they're adding a window where
Oh.
right now, there's a different kind of window, so they're taking out that window too. That's what I'm saying, everything got
Switched around.
switched around
And not in a good way.
and not in the way that we seemingly were promised,
No.
right? So here's another rendering, right, and it's still showing,
The doors and the windows.
yes. I mean, this is really just showing it in situ, but there's nothing on this that would indicate that they're taking away all these windows. So, okay, so that's it. So obviously, this is happening so quick, and then they are allowing for salvage, but just even to salvage, the city of LA still owns the land. So these decisions being made have to be made as if it's a city kind of project. So the prevailing wage consultant said that they could have somebody salvage, but that somebody has to have a contractor's license, a city business license, and has to pay prevailing wage in excess of $57 an hour. And it's like, well, what if just people here aren't paying anybody wages? And so they would assume that if we had a licensed contractor here who wanted to do this, they would assume that he or she is paying themselves the right wage. But it has to be done so fast.
Do we have anybody who fits the criteria of a contractor license that's willing to do
And a
it?
business license. Well, you mean in the 7 hours?
Yeah,
That's
no,
not.
I'm asking the big ask, yeah.
We really have to go, Laura.
I know.
Because
So that's what's going on with that. Anything else? So I wasn't really, I don't know that we can have advice. Okay, that's it. I see there's a chat. What's in the chat? Okay. So I'm gonna save this chat. How am I saving the chat? Yeah, up here.
That's crazy.
Save it. Okay, so I'm gonna say goodbye because it's 9:01.
Okay,
Good night.
all right, good night,
Good night.
Steve, good night.